Good morning. For those of you I've not had the chance to meet, my name is John Highbush, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Thank you all for being with us here this morning. I'd now like to introduce the President Ronald Reagan Marine Corps League Detachment 597, who will parade the colors. I ask that you please stand for the colors and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem. Parade the colors.
Time. Arch. Forward left. Color. Halt. Now. Paris. Color. Freeze. Color.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order! Color! Ready? Out! Over! Out! Oh, forward, left. Oh, forward, oh, forward, oh, forward, left.
Thank you. Please be seated. Before we begin our formal program today, there are a few people in the audience I'd like to make sure I recognize, and I'd like to start with our Ventura County Supervisor, Peter Foy. Peter, thank you for coming. We also have with us the former commanding officer of Naval Base Ventura County, Captain James McHugh. Jim. And finally, we definitely want to say thanks to the Condor Squadron for the great flyover this morning before our program began. A special thank you also to Ms. Belvin Abbey and Dr. Catherine Kuby for providing today's world-class musical performances, and to Paul DiNobilo and the Washington Artillery of New Orleans for the wonderful reenactments in the courtyard. I'd also like to recognize a very special lady here with us today. In the back of the auditorium today, you might have had the opportunity to view the stunning and very moving paintings by artist T. Branson. Her unique artwork, which focuses solely on people's hands, portrays the emotion, love, gratitude, and inspiration we feel towards the men and women who serve our country. She is here with us today. T, would you please stand up? And, of course, a special thank you to all the veterans in our audience today. I understand. You'll be interested to know we have veterans and families here not just from Iraq and Afghanistan, but from the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and World War II. We have a guest who was part of the team that made the only combat jump in Vietnam. We have servicemen who served on Iwo Jima. We have Army Rangers that served under Ronald Reagan's administration. We have an entire group of aviators with the Wings Over Wendy's Veterans Group. We have a Bronze and Silver Star recipients. And we have men and women from every branch of our armed forces. We thank you for your honor, for your bravery, and for your dedication to our country and our freedom. We salute all of you. Now, on this day when we commemorate our veterans, I rely on the words of President Reagan delivered on Veterans Day in 1984 when he gave a very moving tribute. I'd like to quote President Reagan. He said, "Today, we pay homage not only to those who gave their lives, but to their comrades present today and all across the country. You didn't forget. You kept the faith. You walked from the litter, wiped away your tears, and returned to the battle. You fought on, sustained by one another and deaf to the voices of those that didn't comprehend. You performed with a steadfastness and a valor that veterans of other wars salute. And you are forever in the ranks of that special number of Americans in every generation that the nation regards as true patriots." So, in honor of these true American patriots, those who are currently serving, those who have served, or those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, for all veterans, may I please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now to today's program. Our speaker today, in President Reagan's words, is one of our patriots. He gave his best for America and for our freedom, serving our country with honor and distinction in the Vietnam War, the 1989 intervention into Panama, and into Operation Desert Storm. His insight into foreign policy and defense earned him an invitation to join the prestigious Committee on the Present Danger, whose sole mission is to stiffen American resolve to confront the challenge presented by terrorism and the ideologies that drive it. He has also received a presidential appointment to be the senior advisor to the Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs from 1991 to 1992. But his dedication to this country and the military has not wavered since then. Currently, he sits on the board of the Aurora Foundation, a nonprofit organization that focuses on giving grants to colleges and universities to develop veteran-friendly programs that focus on helping our veterans return to the university environment. It's that topic that he'll be addressing today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant Colonel James Zumwalt.
Good morning. Our courageous veterans leaving the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan and transitioning to the educational environment are suffering a problem of epic proportions. There was an article that appeared online by David Wood, and I'd like to read the first 3 sentences of that article because it hits the nail on the head. He said, quote, "In the decade after World War II, 2 million veterans went to college on the new GI Bill, and almost all of them graduated and went on to power the post-war economic boom. This fall, tens of thousands of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans are enrolled in colleges and universities across the country, courtesy of the GI Bill. But almost all of them, 88%, will drop out by next summer, feeling isolated and frustrated in an alien culture," unquote. As John mentioned, I'm on the board of the Aurora Foundation, a nonprofit group that was set up in 2008 when we first learned this problem existed. We started raising funds for grants and encouraged colleges and universities to come up with veteran-friendly programs that would help our courageous vets transition from boots to books to briefcase. The feedback we've been getting from these colleges and the tracking that they're required to do by our funding is that they let us know what impact it has had, and to date, I can proudly report that we've had over 17,000 veterans who have been positively affected by these veteran-friendly programs. But the question still remains, why? Why is it so difficult for these veterans, after being exposed and overcoming the challenges on the battlefield, being unable to complete the relatively minor challenges one thinks would face them in the academic environment? There are studies being done on this, and we're waiting to get some of the answers. I have my own view as to what the reasons are. But what I thought might be of interest this morning is to share with you a transition. It's the transition from the classroom on the battlefield to the battlefield in the classroom. And let me begin by sharing the experiences of one courageous young man who is a bomb technician. He arrived in Iraq 2007. 5 hours after arriving, he found himself being called for his first mission. It was at a girls' school out in an open area in the desert. Now, our bomb technicians are extremely well trained. This fellow did what he was supposed to do. He approached the IED, he circled it, knelt down in front of it, and started going through the steps he's supposed to go through. He has a headphone on, and he's communicating with a teammate a safe distance away so that the teammate can monitor what he's doing and make sure that he's not doing anything he shouldn't be doing. The other thing they're trying to do is to stay focused on what they're doing and not be distracted by anything else. Well, this bomb technician started going about his business, and as he was on his knees, he saw some movement in the sand to his left. Didn't know what it was, but again stayed focused on what he was doing. Saw a little bit of movement on sand to his right. Again, he didn't quite know what that was. He stood up, he was kind of scratching his head, and right where he was kneeling was a third movement of sand. Finally, his buddy says, "Get the hell out of there, they're shooting at you." This was somebody who was so well trained to do his job, and his trainers thought, do you have to train anybody to let them know when they're being shot at? But again, he was so focused on doing his job that he didn't even know when he was being shot at. Let's fast forward now to one of his last missions, so you can see the educational process that took place. 2009, he's operating with a Special Forces unit. Their mission is to take a house believed to be used as a safe house by the militants. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. They're moving up to the house in a built-up area in the shadows. They approach the house. The special units people, special forces people take their positions around the house, climbing up on the roof. This bomb technician, as the senior technician, went in through the front door. The junior bomb technician went in through the back door. The senior technician takes about 3 steps inside the house, doesn't see anything, but he immediately talks to his buddy on his headphones and he says, "I got a gut feeling there's something wrong here." His buddy acknowledges it. The senior technician gives the command, landslide. Landslide means you get out of that house however quick you can. If you have to jump through a window, if you have to jump off the roof, you do it. The command was given. Everybody gets clear of the house. The Special Forces commander comes up to the bomb technician and asks him why he called landslide. And while he was struggling to come up with the right words to tell him, because he didn't know what to tell him, there's a tremendous explosion and the house falls, collapses. There was a pilot airborne. He said, "You've got a runner." They found a militant who had command detonated the house. And because these guys were so quiet going in, he didn't hear them going in. He just heard the commotion of them coming out, so he gave them a minute because he thought they were getting further inside the house when in fact it gave them time to get out of the house. I spoke to this bomb technician and I asked him, "What was it that gave you that gut reaction?" And he said, as he looked around the house, there wasn't a stick of furniture. And the first thing that came to his mind was, these SOBs didn't want to lose any of their furniture, so they had taken everything out of that house and moved it elsewhere. It had turned out that there was obviously a spy in the network, and he had tipped the militants off that this team was going to be coming in there. But that's an amazing process, educational process that took place between the point in time that he didn't even know he was being shot at to the point in time that he was able to get a gut feeling that something was wrong, and he undoubtedly saved the lives of all those who were with him. Let's now transition to the college environment. And I think there's a certain stigma that follows our military people. And let me share some of my thoughts on this. A negative stigma. One of these is in the educational sector. There was a 4-star retired general who was accepted at West Point at age 16, very proudly went in and told his teacher, "I've been accepted at West Point." That teacher's reaction was, "You're a smart guy. You don't have to join the military. You should go to college instead." That 4-star general, unfortunately undergoing a little bit of scrutiny for some of his recent activities, was General David Petraeus. But I don't think what he's enduring as far as this investigation goes should take anything away from the insights he shares with us as a veteran of 30-plus years. And let me read to you what he said. Quote, "When a 16-year-old kid is being told that attending West Point is going to be bad for his future, then there is a dangerous disconnect in America. And entirely too many Americans have no idea what kind of burdens our military is bearing." Unquote. Listen to some of these statistics. World War II, 11.2% of the nation served during 4 years of combat. Vietnam, 4.3% of the American population served during 12 years. Since the global war on terrorism started in 2001, less than 1/2 of 1%. Less than 1/2 of 1% of Americans have served during a time of combat. That is an unbelievable burden for that small, very small minority that is willing to accept that burden. And it puts an inordinate amount of stress on our warriors. In 2011, we lost a soldier on his 14th tour. 14 tours. Never before in the history of this nation have there been so many military personnel committed to back-to-back tours. We cannot continue to keep this pressure on them at that rate. Wood, in his article, mentioned an alien culture. Let me talk to you about that alien culture. I think one of the biggest, and again, this is my opinion, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I think one of the biggest changes is going from an environment where you know you can trust the fellow to your right, the fellow to your left. It's a team concept. One for all for one. You then immediately find yourself in a college environment. And what's the focus on there? Individual performance. That is quite a change for an individual to go through. There's also, I think, a negative stigma among those in the college environment who had never served in the military. And let me give you an example. In 2011, Columbia University was having a meeting with the students and teachers to discuss whether or not after 42 years they should bring ROTC back to the university. Many opinions were expressed. Most were against doing it. And a former Army Staff Sergeant, Anthony Meschek, age 28, came up to the microphone. Meschek had been served in Iraq, been wounded 11 times during one battle, and spent 2 years recovering. He got up and said, "What you people do not understand is there are bad men out there plotting to kill you." He was booed and jeered. And I find that very ironic for another reason. 4 years earlier, this same university welcomed with open arms one of those bad men, the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. And they were so ignorant about what this man wants to do, he started his remarks with a prayer. And that prayer, if you know anything about his beliefs, was for the expedited return of the Mahdi, the 12th Imam. And what did that mean to non-Muslims in the audience? It meant, by the expedited return of the Mahdi, you will either have to convert to Islam or you will die. So here is a man telling his audience of non-Muslims, I want you to convert and die, or die. And he was welcomed with open arms. Yet this staff sergeant was booed. To me, it's a disgrace. Another quote by General Petraeus. When you get out, you sit in the college classrooms with political science teachers that discount your opinions on Iraq and Afghanistan because you were there and can't understand the macro issues they gathered from books because of your bias. You watch TV shows where every vet has PTSD and the violent strain of it at that. Your Congress is debating your benefits, your retirement, and your pay while they ask you to do more. You know your country will never pay back what you've given up. Another part of the stigma is that portrayed by the media. The media feeds an anti-military culture of what I call disproportionality. It will take an unfortunate incident that is committed by a U.S. soldier and cover it for months on end while you see virtually nothing about what the enemy is doing that he is fighting. And let me give you an example of that. And I'll give you an example of my generation and then to the current generation. My Lai. Everybody's heard of My Lai. Everybody knows who William Calley is. How many people know who Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson is? Very few people do. Thompson, a helicopter pilot, landed his helicopter in between Calley and the Vietnamese villagers who were being shot. And he told Calley, if you continue to shoot on them, I will shoot at you. That courageous action took years to be reported by the media. And Thompson was not rewarded until several years later, and only a few years, unfortunately, before his death. Abu Ghraib. I read something about Abu Ghraib for a year straight. Abu Ghraib has been described by the press as prisoner torture. That was not prisoner torture, that was prisoner abuse. Was it right? No, it was wrong, no doubt about it. But again, these stories appear day after day after day, subjecting our troops to further violence by Muslims who get more and more irate as they hear these stories. But I doubt if there's anybody in this room who heard at the same time that Abu Ghraib was going on of a tactic used by Al-Qaeda to get parents who were not willing to cooperate with them to do so. They would invite the parents in for lunch and then serve the cooked remains of one of their children and tell them, if you do not work with us, this will happen to your other children. Let me just ask, has anybody heard that story? Have you heard of Abu Ghraib? Disproportionality. Another example. You saw the picture of the 4 Marines who relieved themselves on the 4 Taliban, or the Taliban soldiers who had been killed. Again, it shouldn't have been done. But let me just try to put this in perspective, and this is something that our media refuses to do. How many of you remember the picture of then Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, towering over Sonny Liston after he knocked him out in the second fight? Now, I don't know whether you're fully aware of what happened in that fight, but Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, was so focused on taunting Sonny Liston that the referee couldn't get him to go to his corner. Technically, he did not win that fight because he did not go to his corner before the count was started. But he was obviously caught up in the emotions of the moment. Another example, and there's a reason for sharing these with you. In 1978, some of you may have recalled watching the Gator Bowl. Ohio played Clemson. Ohio, with a little time left, was racing to score the winning touchdown when a pass was intercepted and the Clemson player was tackled out of bounds. The coach of Ohio State, Woody Hayes, came over and slugged the player that intercepted the ball. Again, emotions of the moment. In neither of these sports situations were these men's lives on the line. In the situation of the picture in Afghanistan with the Taliban, these were guys who had just survived. And think of the relief that they have at that particular moment in having survived a firefight. Again, their action was wrong, but there are emotions that take place that cause you to do things you shouldn't do. And if it can happen in the sports world, it darn well can happen on the battlefield. Let me share a quote by one veteran on this particular photograph. He said, quote, "It is a desperate attempt by confused young men to convince themselves they haven't ended a human life, but has simply shot some coyotes on the back 40. It is an effort to dehumanize the enemy because guilt can easily set in otherwise. And if you want a historic perspective on this, there are pictures too of Winston Churchill and General Patton crossing the Rhine into Germany, relieving themselves into the river before entering Germany. The stigma also is one that the media tries to give a high profile to by, as General Petraeus said, trying to give the PTSD issue attention. If you take a look at the Fort Hood massacre, when the news reports first came out, they tried to say Hassan, the psychiatrist who had committed the slayings, had suffered from PTSD. Well, then they found out he had never been in combat. So then they said, there were reports that came out, well, it was secondary PTSD because of the counseling he'd done for those who had served in combat. You know, anything to stretch the truth. It just makes for good drama, but bad journalism. I also found that the media just hasn't put things in perspective from the standpoint of what we should be seeing on a regular basis in the newspaper or on the internet. One week I took a tally. There was not a single story on Afghanistan. There were 3 stories on Kim Kardashian. I still don't know what Kim Kardashian does, but there was more focus on her than there was on what our troops were doing in Afghanistan. And that has caused me to, I lecture to high school groups, and I give them what I call the 3 Michaels test. I put 3 names on the board: Michael Jackson, Michael Phelps, and Michael Mansour. And I ask them, how many of you can identify at least one of these names? Every hand goes up. Who can identify 2? All the hands go up. Who can identify 3? Not a single hand goes up. I said, let's talk about these 3 Michaels. Michael Jackson, tremendous entertainer. Michael Phelps, tremendous swimmer. But who do you think those 2 Michaels did that for? They did it for themselves. Now let me tell you about Michael Mansour, who threw himself on a hand grenade to save his buddies, his SEAL buddies. They know Phelps and Jackson. They don't know a real American hero. You've heard Tom Brokaw describe our World War II generation as America's greatest generation. My father was a member of that. My grandfather fought in World War II. I don't want to take anything away from that generation. But ladies and gentlemen, this generation today is phenomenal. That story I told you about in my opening remarks was my son. He was awarded the Bronze Star, and I am so grateful to have him back in one piece. And I hope all of us go home tonight and pray for those veterans who remain in harm's way today in Afghanistan, for everything they've done and are doing. You've heard, I'm sure, the description of a veteran as someone who at some point in his life wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America in amount up to and including my life. 6,600 veterans have had that check cashed in Iraq and Afghanistan. 50,000 war wounded have had it partially cashed. It's too late for us to help the latter group other than remembering their sacrifice, but it is not too late for us to remember the wounded and the veterans returning from Afghanistan today who need our help. Thank you.
Great job, Tim. Well done. Thanks so much, Jim. Your work and all that you said is a real inspiration to all of us. It's now time in our program to recognize all of you who are here today representing the different branches of the military. The Santa Susana High School Symphony Orchestra and Vocal Ensemble will be performing a service medley. When you hear your branch's song, please stand so that we can salute you. In addition, if you are a family member here representing a member of the military, please stand in their place when their branch's song is played so we can remember everyone who has participated or sacrificed in protecting our country's freedom.
Army. Marines. Coast Guard. Navy. Air Force.
Well, thank you all for being with us today. We'll conclude today's program with the playing of God Bless America. As a reminder, there are activities in the library courtyard until 3 o'clock this afternoon that you're free to participate in. In addition, all veterans and active members of the military will receive free admission to view the library's exhibits in the Air Force One Pavilion. Thank you all again so much for coming. God bless you all.